Greetings, range seekers, and welcome back to another round of Bendability with me, Emmett Lewis, the Splits Wizard. Today on Bendability, we are going to be talking all things bridge, or all things wheel, depending on how you want to call it. But before we get to the main course of the show, a few shout outs. Big shout out to everyone who has supported our M3 Kickstarter. That is still going on at present. Grab yourself some bargain courses. They're doing very cheap, and if you got one of the packages, you're going to have a lot of training, a lot of training on them. So grab them now. If you're listening in the future, obviously check out our courses at some point, or not. The choice is yours. Just listen to the podcast anyway. It's always free. Anyway, another shout out to Malaysia in general. Right now, I am #1 fitness podcast in Malaysia. So to whoever my listeners are down there, I know a couple of you from Instagram. Thank you so much for getting me to the top of the charts. I didn't think, for some reason I have a strong representation in the charts in Southeast Asia, Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, around there. So whoever is listening down there, thank you so much. Whoever's listening everywhere, thank you so much. But it is just kind of inspiring me to get some travel on, to go back and visit and get some of the amazing food you get down in that part of the world. Hopefully when civilization returns to normality, if such a thing will exist and air travel isn't banned, then maybe I'll get back down there, check it out, and hang out with all you guys and girls and whoever. Anyway, shall we begin? So once again, this is one of our technical introduction to the topic episodes, where we're just going to talk about the bridge, and we're just going to talk about some techniques and some other stuff and some other bits and pieces, and give you a kind of defined terms section of the bridge, and then we will take it from there as usual. So one of the things that I find interesting about the bridge is a compound position. Let's define it first before we define a compound position. A bridge is basically lying down on your back, putting your hands and feet in the ground, bending them up and pressing yourself up into an arch. And I call it a bridge because you look like a bridge when you do it. And if your bridge is strong enough, people can walk over you like you're in a bridge. I think there's a picture on my Instagram that I'll probably splice into the video, where I am at 100, I think it was about 108 kilos at that stage, standing on one of my students at the time, or past student, someone I trained anyway over a while, but obviously very good in her own right before that. Standing on her, she's about 50 kilos, so you can support a lot of weight in a bridge because it is the strongest shape in nature. So yeah, I'll cut that into the YouTube video if you want to take a look at it. Other than that, so this is the kind of fun thing about bridges. They're multifunctional. So we make this kind of arch shape, and that's it. Ta-da, you're doing a bridge. But are you really? And that is kind of one of the things where we get into weird definitions of poses, because for me, and the way I think about flexibility, is bridge is kind of an initiation. There is you before you can do a bridge, and there's you after you can do a bridge. Once you can do a bridge, and it is a nice bridge, then suddenly the bridge itself becomes a way of, basically like a bridge, of transporting goods from one side of the bridge to the other. So then you get access to things that you couldn't really have done before the bridge. Whereas in other positions, like this is the kind of thing, like say in front splits or side splits or pancake, obviously you need them to do things in, but you can generally regress the thing you're doing to compensate for your lack of flexibility or range of motion. And a simple example is like, okay, I want to do stalder press on the floor. My pancake is insufficient, and my active flexibility is insufficient to allow that to happen on the floor. I can raise my hands up and then I lower the floor and go like that. Whereas in the bridge, if we don't really have a bridge, then how are we going to do a back walkover? Yes, I know you could probably tumble it out and other stuff, but not the way I like them done. So it's just a way to think about it. There's a lot more like that. We're going to save that for the advanced bridging episode, where we start talking about like more advanced backbending stuff. We're just going to talk about the bridge today. So the bridge, we can actually think about it as, if we think of our main flexibility positions, where we have splits, we have splits, pancake, and the main kind of manifestation of the position is generally a relaxed position. I am doing a split and I'm sitting on the ground. I'm doing a side split and I'm sitting on the ground. I'm doing a pancake, I'm folding forward, sitting on the ground. that is kind of our main kind of, when people say these positions, oh, it is kind of a relaxed or a static passive kind of position. Whereas a bridge, when we display a correct bridge, it is a static active position. Because think about it, we are actively using the muscles on the back of the body to hold us up, with a strong contribution of the hips, glutes, back in extension, shoulder flexors, etc., etc. So this is one of the things we have to think is like, oh, the bridge is not, it can be relaxing, you can be very relaxed in your bridge, but it's not really a relaxed position in terms of that. So just bear that in mind. At the same time, I always think of like bridges are built from the underneath, like that kind of arch shape that you drive over in a bridge is the important bit of the bridge. What goes on top, on the front, just is kind of, without that support, without that foundation, isn't supported, basically. That's what it comes down to. So when we think of a bridge, we're actually talking about this idea of a compound position, where we're trying to do a few things at once. We can also just think about like definitions of bridge as well. I'll get to that in a second. But in the bridge, okay, we are trying to flex the shoulders to the correct degree, so we're able to get the weight on top of them. We are trying to extend the arms fully. Okay, we're trying to support the weight of the body, 50-60% of the body weight in the arm, 50-60% in the feet, blah, exactly. And then we are trying to extend the thoracic spine. We are trying to extend the lumbar spine. We are trying to allow all the soft tissue and the transverse costo joints and all these things to open and expand. We are hopefully trying to put our hips into extension and extend the hips. And then we're trying to straighten the legs out. So we have a lot of things going on, but if we break it down into 3 segments, we have a shoulder segment, a torso segment, and a hip segment as the kind of foundations of the bridge. And these are what come together to make the bridge. So it's, once again, it comes to this kind of like, just like say, front splits is a combination of 2 positions. It's single leg forward folding and single leg extension, kind of joined together with you in the middle. The bridge is kind of the same idea. It's like bilateral hip extension, spinal extension. I'd almost split the spine into 2 sections as we'll talk about, and then also shoulder flexion. And then that kind of comes together to make our bridge, and we need them all to be kind of, we can compensate for one being greater than the other by not having enough of the other one. So the bridge is always kind of a bit personal, but it is this idea of it's a compound position. So when we have a compound position, say unlike a side split, which is the problem. Side split is just pushing the legs apart, but it's still a compound position because we've got 2 legs doing different things, blah, but we're basically trying to do the same thing. Whereas we have such a big global position when I talk about these compound positions, these become more important when we start talking about things like needle scales, tilts, back ankles, all these kind of more advanced flexibility tricks that I don't teach publicly, but I do teach them privately. So they become more important to understand these kind of thresholds of like, how much of one do we need and how much can we take from another section of the body and put it all together. So we're kind of getting this view of the bridge of that it is complicated, and yes it is. So we're going to basically kind of go all the way around our bridge. We're just going to talk about it and we'll see where we get to on that. So the first kind of idea we have on the bridge is we want to have a correct shoulder position, and this is one of the things that I feel it traps people a little, in that we want to get the hands narrow. But how narrow? That's always an interesting question. Generally, I'd say them slightly wider in your handstand position, depending on what your handstand is like. At the same time, we want to basically to be able to maximize our shoulder flexion, though we don't want to max it out completely, though we can, should we choose to. Once again, these contrasts, is we want to get the shoulders elevated. So generally, we want to actually be pushing the shoulders up, just like in a handstand, and backwards. At the same time, we can be using retraction of the shoulder blades to drive the chest forward. The problem with using too much retraction is it will then turn the hands sort of inwards into this internal rotation, and this can allow us to get further through with the chest without extending the T-spine. So this is one of the things. This can be a very good compensation for someone who is not super flexible on the spine. And you'll see this a bit in capoeira and breakdancing. People who aren't super flexible in the back, they take their arms a bit wider, they internally rotate them, and they get into what is a very functional bridge for their skill. At the same time, in capoeira, you will see this kind of idea of not having the gymnastic kind of fingers pointing back towards the feet position, but having it turned out, because that gives you options to exit the bridge sideways. So this is kind of one of those things, like, obviously, you know, I have my bias as an acrobatics coach and from an acrobatic background of like, this is the way we do things. But when we look at the variety of available options, as long as we know what we're choosing, then we can choose one of them. At the same time, this can be thought of as another way of progressing the bridge, that I can try and get into a nice bridge position and have my hands like 50% wider than my ideal position would be. And then I can slowly work on bringing them together. And this would lead us into more advanced bridges where we're keeping the hands like a diamond or putting the hands on top of each other. So this would be one way to actually think about how we can progress with our shoulders. Generally, what I want in a bridge, and for the goals I have, sort of Mexican handstand stuff, I don't like the shoulders to be too far in retraction. I kind of like to think that when the scapula tilts into the upward tilting motion that it will have, that the upper ribs will still stay and work in concert with it. So it will always stay kind of attached to that position, and the shoulder flexion won't go beyond it. Obviously, we can use it in certain situations, but generally for the first stage of the bridge, for developing the bridge versus using the bridge and finding out our own natural tendencies, I like these shoulders to stay kind of stacked on top. These ribs to stay stacked with the scapula and not having too much chest and too much shoulder flexion. Generally, you can see this when someone is doing a bridge. If we follow the curved shape of the body, and then you follow it down, and then the arms, there's generally like a kink will happen there, like a kink in a hose, versus having a smooth curve. And that is one of the key things I would look for at early stage of bridging. Depending on what you come to in your training, obviously you could have amazing shoulder flexion or very reduced shoulder flexion, but this is what we're trying to look at. Generally, what we want in shoulder flexion is we want the ability to get basically past the wall shoulder test. Shoulder flexion, sit against the wall with a flat spine, put your arms up overhead. I have this on my YouTube for handstands. We want that. What we're also looking for in the bridge is actually, we want the ability to externally rotate the arm. So if you think of our normal external rotation position or Cuban rotation position, we want the ability to externally rotate the arms. And generally, we can use a heuristic that when we look at the lower segment of the arm, it will go past the ears. That's a nice heuristic for it. It just means you have external rotation, basically for measuring it from like the kind of lying down your back, pointing the ceiling, past 90 degrees. We want the shoulder flexion to be about 90 degrees. We want it to be a bit beyond, but 90 degrees is a good start. And we want our external rotation to be a bit more than this, because it gives us a bit of wiggle room to play with, because as we bring the arms up and we keep them in the plane we want, they will tighten a bit into external rotation, so we don't want them to be excessively tight. So these are kind of good benchmarks and good things that if you are testing your shoulder flexion, if I'm looking at my shoulder flexion, I'm going, okay, my shoulder flexion hasn't improved for a bit, and I'm stretching my lats and I'm doing my flexion raises and everything. Okay, let's just look at the external rotation. If you find the external rotation is not going beyond your flexion range, then freeing up the external rotation is a good way to go about it. It won't fix every single case, but it's a good place to start. So once we kind of have that, now we don't have to get these sequentially. We can be working on them all at the same time, but I'm going sequentially through the body. The next level is the T-spine, which is the hardest bit to get, because we have to think of like our spinal anatomy and the different shapes of vertebrae we can have here. Like there can be such a massive difference between vertebra, the costotransverse joint, which is the joint of the ribs, the Y-shaped joint of the ribs onto the vertebra, the thickness of the spinal column, the size of the spinal processes, the actual like preceding training history, what has gone on. And it's kind of, there can be a lot of things that can build up and make this very difficult to move. So it generally it will easily come very easy for you, or you'll have to work on it. You know, it's not one of these kind of intermediate things where it's like, oh, I can, you know, I've never worked on my splits and it's not easy, but it comes very, very quickly. Like we can have that. or, you know, whereas with the thoracic spine, it takes a lot of time. There's a lot of detail to be found. I have this kind of idea of flexibility training where we can basically, we can brutalize someone into a side split. It's quite easy to do. We can just linear progression, mash them, add weight when we can, max it out. Boom, it will get a side split. It's not elegant, but it works. Whereas we can't really do that with the T-spine because all the leverage points we can be using will be basically using the arm as a lever point with the weight of the body into the front of the shoulders and cause a lot of shoulder labrum issues. It's one of these things, I see this a lot lately with a meme exercise that have gone around where people are like hanging off, what is they doing exactly? They are hanging off something, so like a set of stall bars, and they have a foam roller or solid roller at the back of their shoulders, and then they're kind of lowering them down into like an inverted Mexican tuck handstand. In theory, this exercise is very nice, in theory. The problem with it is, like, I personally have seen it claim so many shoulders of people who are fantastically prepared that it kind of made me go, well, why are these people who are very well prepared? I've seen it claim shoulders of some straps beasts I know very quickly. And I was like, well, if these people are very more prepared, much more prepared than me, like why the fuck am I doing it? And then I kind of looked at it like, if we work out the force graphs of what's going on in this position, it's actually incredibly interesting because we have two things going on. One, we have if we look at the bone level, so we have the arms going one way to the support point with a lever or a lever fulcrum at the other side, then the whole weight of the body being cantilevered off this hinging point. And then at the same time, if we think about it, we have the whole sort of sling system, or we could think like the muscular system of the body as well, stretching out across this point. Now, what happens is if we think about the downward force through the point, at that there has to be a force normal to this, so going straight up, and generally this will coalesce into the anterior delts. Now, we work out the leverage of the bone system. This is very, very rough maths. We work out the leverage of the bone, so we have the length of the arms multiplied by the weight of the body. Then we work out the sling system. We have tension on one side, tension on the other side. We have 2T. So then if we say the tension is equivalent in the fulcrum of the leverage as well, then we have 3 times the force acting normal to the vector through your shoulders, and then snap city. So it is one of those moves. I'm going to say, you know, I have this much more formally done out. I can pull it up somewhere if someone wants to read it. But it is one of these moves where the risk to the reward and the loading of the passive structures is almost a bit too high for my liking. I'm not going to say you shouldn't do it. I'm going to say you should approach it incredibly, incredibly cautiously, because once again, we are getting into this idea that there's always this argument, and it's been going on since whenever I started reading up about training. And I don't want to say it's nuanced, but it's definitely more nuanced than I'm willing to give it in this episode about the bridge, where it's like there's one side of the divide is like, oh, basically the body can't adapt, the bony structures and the passive structures can't adapt, and then the other side of the argument is like the body can adapt, and people kind of extrapolate them going like, oh no, we're fixed and we just got what the structure we have, and we got the other ones like, no, we can change everything and things can't get stronger. It's like the classic one in the Jefferson Curl. You shouldn't lift in a rounded vice. Shouldn't lift with a rounded back because it'll go, and it's like, well, maybe if we increment up the load slowly, we'll increase our capacity to do it. The argument for the Jefferson curl. The problem is, I think people extrapolate. We have this amazing capacity in the muscles and nervous system to adapt, and we don't actually have this big a capacity in the tendons and the joint capsules in particular to adapt. So while you can sustain very strong forces through these kind of positions via the muscles and that kind of adaptation and get very skillful, so the nervous system gets very good at being very strong in this position, at the end of the day, you're basically using a position which is a joint lock used to destabilize someone and putting more and more force through it till eventually something can go. So it has, that move in particular, just has a very high risk to reward profile for me, but that's okay, because getting the bridge and getting a very nice bridge and opening the T-spine doesn't require it. So the T-spine is, we have to take a very subtle point of view of doing it. So the subtle point of view is that we need to think about how the rib joint, the stretching in the lengthways direction of the spine all interplays. Because if we think about the spine column, everyone's thinking like vertebra and they're kind of stacked on top of each other. It's more like a tube that is surrounded by a kind of like thick fascial layer, and then the muscles like the multifida and the rotoras, they're not really like a bicep where it's like, oh, this muscle's connecting one to the other. It's more kind of like embedded in this tube. So it's like, it's kind of snake-like, and we want this snake spine to be able to go. But for snake spine to go, it has to be stretched long. Once snake spine is not flaccid, then we can start going, okay, so we're doing any back bending exercise, but we'll talk about the back bend over support. It's one of our favorite ones. It takes a while, but when it does, it's one of these ones that has a very hockey stick graph in terms of risk to reward, or just reward for doing. So the first kind of stage of doing the back bend over support where you're locked in position is learning how to actually articulate the ribs. So to do this, we have to think of this idea of like we are breathing into the rib cage. So we throw out all this stuff we hear about, like, don't breathe into your ribs. And like, no, breathe into your ribs. This is what we want you to do. We want to use targeted breathing at the same time, the elongation of the spine. And we want to breathe out, expand the ribs sideways. So we think about the ribs kind of they go sideways, but they also go slightly upwards and elevation. Okay, we've got that going. Breathe in, expand, feel that happen. Do it bigger than you think. This is the mistake everyone makes. No one does it big enough. Like, you have to, like, it's kind of because you're in a stretch position. When you think you're full of air, you're only about 50% full, so keep sucking. Then you let the air out, and then as you let out, you let the weight of the hips pull you down more, and then pull yourself backwards gently. This is the thing. If you use too much force on the T-spine, it stabilizes like you would in a deadlift and locks itself in position. What we need now is a subtle knife that can cut through the outer layers of tension, get into the deeper muscles and get them to extend the spine. At the same time, because we're working with the intercostals and the transcostal joint, we want to be able to, like, we'll feel this once you develop sensitivity. You'll feel it lock back down and it begins to work like a ratchet. I breathe to the right amount. I go expand sideways. I suck more than I ever sucked in my life. I feel it open. I'm now bubble. I sit down and I let the spine extend on the out breath. And then as it's extending, as I feel it, I gently give it a nudge with the muscles close to the spine. So focus on the bones for that. It will take a while to develop this skill. When you develop it, it is life-changing, without a doubt. You're able to bend your back in ways that you didn't think possible. But it is a skill, and it takes a subtle knife to find it. So once we've found the ability to extend the T-spine using the kind of technique I'm suggesting, that's one way to think about it. There is another way to think about it, but that's a very good way to start with. We could also do it in a suspended Cobra or in the Cobra stretch itself, or any kind of backbending position. The backbend of support is just the easiest one to find it, in my experience. Then we have lumbar hyperextension. So this is what kind of catches people out, and this is kind of what set the stage for the Great Bridge Schism of 2008 or 2006, where Coach Summer came along and defined the Thoracic Bridge, or maybe he didn't define it, maybe someone else did, as opposed to the wheel. And basically what he was talking about in this is a bridge that the whole spine is extending and not just the lumbar. Now, it is very good, and it's very good to have this kind of delineation. It just wasn't named before Coach Summer, so thank you for that, because you caused a lot of confusion, but it's also good that you named it. And in the Thoracic Bridge, the Jurassic spine bridge, let's call it Jurassic spine, we want to have an even curve all the way around the spine and not just be dumping it all into the lumbar spine, because it is incredibly common, particularly with Coach Summers in gymnastics, to see, particularly with the girls and the younger girls, that they have basically what we call hinging, where they'll hinge and they'll have like 60 to 70 degrees of flexibility over a sort of 3 to 4 vertebral segment of the lumbar spine. This is okay if you're hypermobile, and if you train it, it's perfectly fine. But at the same time, it's better to kind of distribute the load all the way around the spine, and it's better kind of for I don't want to say long-term longevity, because I know a lot of contortionists who are much, much older than me and more flexible than me. So, and they don't have back pain as well. So anyway, but the goal here is to just not dump everything into lower back and basically get everything involved. This is the thing with bridge, particularly when you're approaching as an adult. we need to get everything that can bend bending to its kind of optimal degree or at your stage of training. Then we can look and see what you specialize in. So that is kind of the idea. And you can see this a lot in people's bridge training when you see it posting before and afters. And you'll see people just like, their T-spine hasn't moved, but they're able to shift the weight over more because their lumbar spine is moving and their hips are extending, or they figured out how to get on top of their shoulders. So kind of watch out for that as well, because it can be a trick of the eye when you think you've progressed when you're looking at your photos, or you think someone else has progressed. Just make sure that you're not dumping it into the lower spine. Really pay attention to that zone, particularly like the sacral hip kind of area. So anyway, so then we want hip extension. How much hip extension? As much as we got. But this is kind of where hip extension gets interesting, because we need a certain amount of hip extension. Because if we think about what's happening on the bridge, so I push up onto a bridge and my arms are not vertical to the ground. Then I need to get them vertical. So I push them vertical, and I think in the bridge, so shoulders going up, arms are going straight. Shoulders go up to the ears, back is bending. And then to get the spine and the center mass more over the hands, I need to push myself in the direction of the chest. But at the same time, I have to lift myself upwards. So we need to think like, basically we're doing this mad kind of weird angle, what do I call it? Hip extension or hip thrust with this idea of like trying to spill yourself and roll yourself on top of yourself. So this is one of the key things where if we have more hip extension, we can lift the hips higher and get into more of this lifting zone, which in turn will get us on top of these shoulders better. Because what I'm looking for in particular, the first stage of the kind of bridge development is I'm looking for the arms to go from pointing towards the feet to vertical to slightly past the wrists. That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for, basically, I'm looking for the rear joints, or more correctly, the fourth rib, to be past the wrist joint when it goes over with the leg straight. That will say, okay, we have achieved bridge version 1.0. Up until then, you just work on the various iterations. So once we have that, then we have something we can start using for the more advanced bridging exercise that you use the bridge. But onto that point, we get there. So generally when we're in this kind of Jurassic Bridge, what, thoracic? I can never say that word right. Anyway, we're in the Jurassic Spine Bridge. We're in Jurassic Park and we're going out and we've defeated the dinosaurs. So we're pushed up. So when we're pushing onto the top of the hands, generally you'll find that people will end up with generally 70% of their weight on one side on their hands and 30% in their legs. This can be a bit deceiving, so you might need to learn to balance while maintaining the position, at the same time keeping the feet and hands on the ground. There is a tendency, like you'll see this when people are learning bridge, when they want to get their weight going up, they'll come up onto their toes. This is generally a sign that they don't have enough hip extension for that degree of bridging they want to do. So generally you need to work on your hip extension. But we can actually use this trick to learn how to compress our bridge further and further. So if I was to, let's say I want to make my bridge really small, and I'm in the bridge and I'm walking in, and I'll walk my feet in until my heels come off the ground. Then I can get on top, I'll re-establish my shape, I will push my shoulders, I will pull my chest through, I will use the muscles in my back. I will then ask myself a question, Emmett, where do you feel this stretch? And be precise. Do I feel it in my abs? Do I feel it in my chest? Do I feel it in my shoulders? Do I feel it in my crotch? Do I feel it in one leg? Where do I feel it? Then I will contract and relax that zone only. Contract, flex, squeeze, 3 to 10 seconds, whatever it is. Relax. Then on the out breath, maintaining my shoulder stack in position, I will then let my heels go down to the floor. And this kind of process can be repeated. This is the kind of thing, you need a bridge that you can hold for about 60 seconds to be able to do this. So that's what I mean by bridge's initiation aspect. But then once you can do this, then you can start applying this technique and walking yourself in and in. So that kind of gets very interesting very quickly. And it gets very deep very quickly. And then it's like, oh, where do I want to go? And it's that kind of classic thing we see on, I don't know, yoga Instagram, as people send me this one a lot actually, or it was doing the rounds a few months ago, it's not so much anymore. It's like, can't do a bridge with your hands elevated. So if we think about the way of learning the bridge, one of the ways of learning the bridge, once we're working on the decoupling stages of trying to get the torso and shoulders communicating well while not putting demands on the hip, is to do a feet elevated bridge. So it makes sense that as the feet are going down, 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 the bridge is getting harder and harder to do. Then if we were to go, oh, let's just put the feet down through the floor and raise the hands up, is the bridge going to get easier or is it going to get harder? Now, a small bit of elevation, particularly at an angle, is okay if people are tight in the wrists and need to work on it. That's okay. I'd also suggest using small parallettes or push-up bars instead. It's a bit better. But, you know, you got to work with what you got. Whereas when you see people going like, okay, do a bridge on 3 yoga blocks. I'm like, well, that's a very advanced bridge for some people when you're saying this is a regression for a normal bridge. So we have to be, you know, choose our battles wisely, more so than anything else. So, where am I going to go next? So I want to kind of talk about some of the exercises and things I found to be very useful over the years for developing the bridge. One of the first exercises I find to be very useful is the hanging Cobra. So this is when you would set up using a set of rings and you'll hang basically in a Cobra shape, hanging Cobra, it's in the name. This position is really nice because it's very scalable in terms of like, oh, we could have someone who has never really stretched before. We get the benefit of, you know, a Cobra stretch, but at the same time, you get this passive elongation of the body. So you're kind of stretched out. So the spine is already doing this expansion in one direction. And then we can walk the legs under the support and get deeper and deeper into the position. The only problem is it obviously takes a bit of hang time, but it's quite nice for this. At the same time, because we have basically tractioned out the spine, we can begin to play with this kind of breathing I've talked about, where I breathe into the rib cage and I let myself go. I breathe into the rib cage. And then at the same time, because a lot of your weight is supported, the hips can be on contact with the ground, the weight is going into the rings, your kind of spine is kind of like a stretchy spring in between it. You can begin to play with actively bending the back, using the muscles of the spine, but without excessively using the ones like the erector spinae, the closer to your skin muscles is the easier way to think about it. So it can be like, how precise can I get in bending my spine? Can I move vertebra by vertebra? I have actually met someone, my teacher, Sir Jogier, who teaches me all the Tao stuff. He can actually move his vertebra one by one in all directions, in up, down, rotation, and can't do lateral flexion actually. But yeah, up and down, into flexion and extension and into rotation. And it's kind of freaky. I can grab a vertebra, hold it, feel them separate out, and I can feel them move it. That's a hell of a level of spine control that I do not have, but I wouldn't probably believe it unless I'd felt it. And then I have actually had someone point it out that I'm gonna have to check my notes now, but I think there's a video called Returning the Spine to its Fluidic Origin. And I can't remember the name, I'm incredibly sorry for this, but I can remember the video. That one of the people, so I know, I explained this feat to someone, and someone else who trained with this dance style had said, oh yeah, a couple of people in this can do that as well from training their dance style. So that's kind of interesting. The interesting thing on that is both sides of them use a lot of kind of imagery, or using that in a very loose term, atmospherics of the body to generate the movement, and not so much like concentration. So use that as your hint. Try to use like an atmosphere of like movement. Like you're not kind of a system of pulleys and levers. You're more a system of misty spinal bending dragon leprechauns, something like that. So yeah, the hanging Cobra is very good. It's also very good because if you're quite restricted in shoulder flexion, it will do some of the work there. One of the kind of interesting things I find when we're speaking about the shoulders is obviously we like the lat stretch as a kind of, yeah, as a shoulder flexion developer. One of the more interesting things is once we can get the shoulder flexion slightly above the head or slightly behind it, we put it into the back bend. If we think about we're doing a thoracic bridge or bending the thoracic spine, what is the lats doing? Are they getting longer or are they getting shorter? Seeing as they're on the inside of the curve, they're actually getting shorter, and it's one of the more advanced skills in more advanced contortion is learning how to actually use the lats in such a way that it bends the spine. You can start earlier in this position of the hanging cobra to try and experience this, but it kind of takes it's one of the not that I train contortionists too much anymore, but it's one of the more advanced skills for getting really deep into your back bends with yourself, is learning how to actually use the lats. I kind of call it like, it's like the chicken dance. If you know that bird dance where you pull the shoulders back and get the lats to engage the bending that way. Very advanced skill, takes a while. So we have this kind of idea that we have some exercises for the upper body, we have the lower body. We're going to do hip extension the whole podcast because it's such a complicated topic, so I will skip that now if you will allow me. Now, the next kind of one we want to look at is, there was kind of a discovery I made where I was like, basically there was holding static bridges and holding bridge, like feet supported bridges. I was like, okay, I was quite strongly in the camp of like, you have to get that nice. You have to get the range of motion before we start using it for stuff. And using it for stuff at the very initial phase was doing push-ups. What I actually found out, because we were doing a static active position, static active flexibility generally responds very well to dynamic movements, is that by doing dynamic movements with pauses, we can iterate into the bridge. So I found that doing the bridge push-up or even just partial bridge push-ups with the feet elevated bridge was far more successful than doing static holds at developing the actual bridge itself. So it was kind of an interesting find myself, where I was like, oh, that's kind of, I would have expected, obviously kind of, yeah, I suppose in like early days, because like, in circus we had a lot of like hold bridge for 30 seconds or a minute, okay, do this, and regressing it to people who couldn't bridge, like, okay, feet elevated bridge 1 minute before we start doing something with it. Whereas doing the bridge push-up, so a bridge push-up would define it as like we are basically entering a bridge. So we'll go set up on top of our head, we'll push the arm straight. Once we push the arm straight, that is only part of the movement. We will then push the shoulders up to the ears, retract slightly, and then use the muscles of the back, possibly the lats if we can get into it, to try and pull and push the chest away from the feet. At the same time, we'll squeeze the butt and we'll try use a bit of leg support to push us deeper into this. So we're trying to take this idea of targeting and trying to connect my ass to my scapula, and I'm trying to make them touch. So this idea, and then we could hold it for 2 to 3 seconds, which could be a quite intense 2 to 3 seconds if you extrapolate it to 30 seconds, but you're able to survive there for that time. Come out, bend the arms. Now this is the kind of thing, you could bend the arms all the way down to the head. When you're beginning this, I like people to do that, just get a bit of extra volume and strength. As you get more advanced, you just need to unlock the arms, come out of the bridge into the initial bit, come up higher, arms go straight, shoulders up to ears, actively bend the back and try to sit on your own shoulders while straightening the legs. This is one of the ones that had, like, it was one of those things, like the bridge training, I'd say, in terms of how I approach it, has gone through more revolutions and more changes, more alterations over the years than any of the other kind of positions we've worked on. Like, there's a lot of stuff, there's a lot of nuances gone in, but bridge in terms of like, oh, I was doing this and it didn't work, or found this and this. Well, the bridge push-up was the revolution that really got things moving. So yeah, check it out, add it to your training if you're not doing it. If you find you're stuck on the bridge, work up to doing 10 bridge push-ups with 3 to 4 second pauses in each one, then you'll know all about it. So that's kind of an overview of the bridge. Check my time. So there's one other topic I'd like to talk about, is the idea of radial expansion. And it's kind of one of these ideas that, like, when we talk about bending the spine, we want to bend the spine at every single segment possible it can. And it can be tricky to kind of access it, but we have to have an idea. So if we think about our old task-driven friend of like, let's just bend backwards. We go from standing and we bend backwards. Generally what most people will do will just be arching the lower back and maybe some upper maybe a bit of the upper, but generally that is kind of like hip hinge but backwards. What we need to think about is a way of actually getting into this extension, just like we would in a Jefferson curl. We get into it sequentially. We can do the exact same thing going into extension. I think of the idea, I call it radial expansion, because I think of the idea of a wheel with a radius or a bicycle wheel with a set of spokes. Now, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get myself to basically the wheel is rolling down my back, and I'm trying to, every time a spoke makes contact point with my back, I'm trying to expand at that point. So I'm trying to bend myself into a wheel shape. That's why it's called the wheel, in my mind anyway. And I'm trying to basically, at every point there is a spoke on the wheel, and we can have basically infinite spokes as well, we're trying to bend at. So instead of going like straight backwards, we have this idea of like, okay, which way do I bend? Now, the thing we have to think about the bending is the spoke on the spine will always be pointing at a slightly different angle. Some of them will be pointing up, some of them pointing slightly down, some of them pointing at right angles to the spine, some of them pointing towards the floor, that kind of idea. So we have this fan effect going on. And with that idea of the fanning, we need to try and like always think about like, I'm trying to basically push the point that is directly opposite the spoke away. At the same time, the other bits that are on the other side of the spoke, so imagine the spoke, bit above it goes away, other bits go to conform to kind of push it in that direction. It's kind of like bending a bow. So it's like, it's that idea that was going on. Getting the skill of back bending and getting this idea that I can max out my back without just putting it all into the lower back, all into the one junction, but I can try and get every single part to contribute it. Using this image of the wheel and using this idea of like every single spoke, every single vertebra bends, every single rib participates, every single bit of hip extension participates. This is how you really max out your genetic potential in the spine to get into it. And this is one of the things where like, even when I'm working with very advanced back benders, like this is a large amount of the training we do is actually just trying to go like, okay, well, you know, let's just say like they're very advanced, they got head sit or they're working on triple fold or something like this. And I'm like, well, we've maxed out basically everything easy. Now we need to get like the small little percentages that accumulate and make everything communicate quite well together. And it's the same when you're learning this. If you start learning this at the start, it can feel very unrewarding at the start because your spine doesn't bend that well. But we want to basically give you a system of control and a system of idea motor skills where you can take an idea and translate it into a kind of movement. And it takes a while. It takes a lot of frolicking around and kind of getting into it. But getting this idea of like that radial expansion of the spine and trying to apply it to every single back bending position you may do, regardless of what it is, and just trying to find like, oh, well, if I bend myself back, say, you know, if you're looking at me on the camera, so I bend myself back, okay, so now my second two ribs, they're pointing up to the corner of the room. So if I want to expand them, they have to go in that direction. Okay, my sternum is now pointing at the camera. So then I want to point my sternum at the camera. My lower ribs are actually kind of pointing slightly downwards. So then they need to expand that way. And this kind of idea and this precision is what we're looking at. So instead of this abstract idea of bending backwards, it's just like I'm bending in this direction at this point. The next point down below it bends in a different direction. And that kind of idea, the fan or the wheel, will get you there. Yeah. So that is the end of our introduction to the bridge and some ways to think about it. Other than that, yeah, once again, check out our Kickstarter. I'm going to keep pimping it because we've got 2 weeks left. I'm dreading, but I'm also really looking forward to writing the book. And if we can get the support to the book level, that means we'll be able to release the book in, I'm not going to say very quickly, but it just means I'll be able to like shift all my focus once the courses will be staged, obviously with the editing and the videography and stuff like that. We have them filmed, but they need to be edited. So while they're doing, I'll be able to be locked away on I would like to say I'll be down in Southeast Asia with my Malaysian friends, chilling out and thing, but it'd be more likely I'd be locked in a shed with a guard dog, a guard albus, locking me, riding away. If we could reach that goal, amazing. If you have supported us, amazing. Other than that, yeah. One other thing, actually, I got some good feedback from people, not a huge amount of feedback on the the dissolution breeding stuff. There is an option if you're really good, if enough people just message me. So if you really liked it, you tried it out and you want more of them, message me and I'll start putting a few more up. I need a certain amount of people just to make it worth my time. Doesn't, you know. So even if you, yeah, just let me know if you enjoyed it. If not, I won't do them again. But if you did, I can start making a few short ones and put them as a kind of bonus content. Other than that, yeah, I've been the Splits Wizard. You've been great, and we catch you next week.